What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the FreeMelon Society. I'm Eli Martyr, and I'm joined here with the Professor Spira. And I couldn't be more excited about this. This is a topic, what we're going to be getting into today is a topic that I wanted to tackle, but I thought, you know what? I think two minds are going to be better than one on this one. So before I go on, Professor Spira, thank you so much for coming on the show with me today. Really appreciate you having you here.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me on. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, no problem. So today we're going to be talking about the microbiome, because it's this emerging field that seems to have popped up out of nowhere. It hasn't. It's been around for a long time, as we're going to get into. But what we want to do here is, because Spira and myself, I mean, we're approaching the health community. We're approaching health information from admittedly a slightly different perspective than you generally find in the conventional field, right? So I feel like it's good to put our input into this and to wrap the data that is being provided to us about the process of microbial health, how you build it, how you cultivate it, right? So we're getting a lot of data, but in my opinion, I feel that there are interpretations of that data that can be a little misleading when it comes to how to structure your health, right? How to structure your diet. What I want to impress on the listeners before we even get started is that what we're not trying to do here is trying to debunk all the data, all the science is wrong. Like, nothing can be further from the truth, because a true science is simply a science that helps to corroborate natural principles, right? And a lot of the data is, in fact, good data. I think what we're doing is adding context. That's it. Okay, we're just adding context. So we're not really here to just throw away everything. If you thought that that's what we're doing, okay. So, but obviously we'll get into this discussion here.
As we say, an interrogation of ideas.
Yes.
You know, to vigorously interrogate, because that's tends to be one of the biggest problems with these concepts, is people take them as fact as opposed to asking questions. Is this theory really true? You know, and so that's what I think we'll be doing here today, is interrogating some of these concepts that many people have been accepting as fact, as opposed to questioning where did this come from and why is it in front of me? Because oftentimes the answer to that question is marketing, but we're going to explore that and see where this came from.
Right. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so I think, the best thing to do would be to start off with giving us just a brief history of, or maybe we should just explain. Okay, you know what? Let me give just a couple of definitions first. Then we can go into some of the history. Then what we'll do is we'll explain some of the core tenets that support this new emerging field of microbial health and microbiome research. And then we'll get into some of our particular questions and our particular, challenges in what we find. So when we say microbiome, this is fun because I've actually heard different definitions. So already it starts to become a little challenging. But whatever definition, generally speaking, when we're talking about the microbiome, we're talking about the microbial organisms that live inside and outside of your body. Okay, so whether they've used the term microbiota to define all those living germs and microbes in and on your body, or whether they use microbiome, sometimes it's interchangeable. Unfortunately, I can't do anything about that. So you might find definition of microbiome as the genetic code of that community, or you might hear microbiota referred to defining that community. But either way you slice it, that's generally what we're talking about, okay? So whether a microbiota sometimes refers to one individual, so one microbe in the community, where microbiome is the entire community, okay? So some of these terms are interchangeable, If we're talking about dysbiosis, if we use that term, it just means loss of harmony in the gut, right? So dys, away from, and biosis, life, or the condition of life. So dysbiosis is like a loss of harmony of the microbial life. Okay, so those are just quick general terms, and this body of science has come into popularity now since, I believe, 2012, since the American Gut Project, which is one of the largest studies of the human microbe, took place. But as Spira is going to get into, it goes deeper back into our history. So in brief, this might not be an in-depth historical analysis, but yeah, give us an idea of just where this is coming from, this body of research.
Okay, so I'm just going to do super brief.
Yeah.
Interestingly, back in the 16th century in China, you could see at least the first historical evidence of feces-derived products for gastrointestinal issues, whereby what they call yellow soup. They would make yellow soup, something they called yellow soup, and in the cases of severe food poisoning and diarrhea. So there wasn't, nobody had microscopes. They weren't looking at what was going on in the specimen, but they saw, hey, wait a minute, we take this, somebody's having some issues, and we give them some yellow soup, and sometimes it helps. And so that is one of the earliest versions there. If you go to in Europe in 1683, was this Antony van Leeuwenhoek? I'm sure I butchered that. I'm so sorry, sir. But so he was making use of newly developed microscopes at the time, and he developed and illustrated in a letter written in 1683 to the Royal Society of London that he discovered 5 different kinds of animalcules. So that was the earliest terminology for this, animalcules, and the term he used to describe the bacteria. And he was doing a study trying to compare things that he found in his mouth. So looking at the bacteria in his mouth and then comparing it to, he did end up comparing it to fecal, I believe. I read that. But that's kind of got things started. Around 200 years later, there is Liddy published a book on flora and fauna within living animals, which most likely represents the official document considered by many as the origin of microbiota research. Right. Then many of you are familiar with Pasteur and Koch and some of the other, and I've talked about some of that on my channel. I know you've talked about them before. Don't dig deep into that, but essentially that's where a lot of the modern day micro organism concepts and their relationship to food, their relationship to the body comes out of that, and where they kind of laid the foundation of modern microbiology and modern understanding of infectious diseases. And besides postulating the germ theory of disease, Pasteur also was convinced that non-pathogenic microorganisms might have an important role in normal human physiology. And I'll go ahead and offer, just while we're here, the germ theory definition. Germ theory of disease is the currently accepted scientific theory for many diseases. It states that microorganisms known as pathogens or germs can affect disease, and that is one of the concepts that we are really told not to question, that you just grow up and like, oh, you must have caught something. You caught a cold, like, oh, you got something there. Oh, that thing it's going around, the flu, it's to the point where it's literally built into our vernacular. So it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to question things that are just a part of your vernacular, where nobody's questioning. Well, what? Maybe there's no such thing as a virus being at the foundation of why one is sick, or the good bacteria versus bad bacteria concepts, which is those are newer concepts. But so that's the. I'll probably stop there, because that's the origin stuff. Of course, there's a lot in the 50s and the 60s and all the stuff in the past 30 years. But in terms, I'm really a stickler for looking at the origin of a concept. Like, where does a concept start? When was it coined? What was the original definitions of it? And what were the original analytical questions or scientific questions and hypothesis, and really analyzing that and seeing because if there were problems with the original questioning, were they fixed over the years, or do we have rotten roots going way back to the beginning? And then when that's the case, then we kind of have to start over again in terms of our analysis.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. Thank you so much for all of that. And I couldn't agree more. When looking into the origin of things, it's instrumental in allowing you to have a full understanding of its current contemporary manifestation, right? So you have to do this when we're exploring these subjects. Because as we're going to see, the concept of the germ theory, it informs a lot of the interpretation, or I should say misinterpretation, of what we're currently seeing in this emerging nascent field of microbiome research. So it's very, very important, and we'll see that as we go on here. I have to laugh, because even back then, they knew the power of euphemism. Yellow soup. Yellow soup.
Right. Yeah, right.
Great. It's crap soup, all right? It's human crap.
You say drink diarrhea to stop diarrhea. That's the logic of. Okay.
It's unreal, right? Human beings, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Ain't nothing new under the sun.
Exactly.
Holy moly. It's just amazing. You go back in history. So, okay, I think what we want to do now is we want to just list for the audience some of the core principles, the core tenets that characterize pretty much all of the researchers in this field, right? So the core tenets that they all kind of subscribe to. And I hope I don't want to mischaracterize anybody or any approach. So I think this is a general sum of what you will find, okay, as the ideology. So one tenet that we subscribe to is that biodiversity is the key. Okay, so the more diverse, the better. Talking about microbiome or microbes in your gut microbiome community, the more diverse they are, the better. So if you've got way more diversity, different species, then that is equated to better health. Okay, and this is borne out in research and studies. They've found that healthier people generally have a healthier, and they would equate healthier with diversity. So have a healthier gut microbiome. Okay, so that's what they're finding. That's the association we found, is that healthier people have the diverse microbiome, and ones that are not as healthy have a less diverse microbiome. Did you have something you wanted to add there? Or no?
No.
Okay, good, yeah. So that's one key tenet, is that biodiversity is king. The American Gut Project, I mentioned earlier, that was in 2012. And again, largest, most expansive study on the human gut microbiome, headed by a guy named Robert Knight. And the findings led to Robert Knight making a statement a couple of years later that the single greatest predictor of a healthy gut microbiome is the diversity of plants in one's diet. All right, so that's like the core philosophy there. There's also another tenet that you can tease out from most of the research here, where they've adopted the idea that there is this constant war going on between good bacteria and bad bacteria in your body. And what happens is it's a contest of preponderance. It's a contest of which ones come in greater numbers. So if your bad bacteria, if the entire gut microbiome is constituted of only 5% bad bacteria and then 95% good bacteria, then you're going to be healthy because they're always waging this battle and then the good guys win. But if you have more bad bacteria than good, then that's when you get sick. So it's a matter of crowding out. So the purpose that we're looking for in these tenets is that we need to crowd out the bad bacteria with good bacteria. Okay, and there are other kind of similarities you can find regardless of which researcher or where you go. The more you feed the bacteria plant food, the stronger they get. And so proportional, it's proportional. The more proportional plant diversity you introduce into your diet, the stronger those bacteria associated with those foods get. And if you starve out some of the bad bacteria that thrive on not great foods, then they also die out. And this seems to make sense, of course. Fiber, the last one I'll say, fiber is what is the fuel, is like the super fuel for the bacteria. So the more fiber you introduce into your body, the more short chain fatty acids you will produce, because the bacteria feed on the fiber and they produce short chain fatty acids. And these are a boon for us in our diet. 3 types of short chain fatty acids. You have acetate, butyrate, and propionate. And these have a whole range of positive effects in our bodies. Okay, so those would generally be the core principles that we're looking at when you go into this research. Okay, if you had anything to add, then you know let me know.
Well, just one thing that came to mind was already we get into an issue where it's like it's bacteria, but there's also fungi, protozoa, viruses, like all that for them makes up the microbiome. Yeah. Then where things start to get, for a lot of folks in our community, where things start to get even more confusing is then you throw in some candida and some like fungus and people that say, oh, don't eat fruit. That fruit you'll feed the candida.
Yeah.
So stay away from fruit. Then and that's the kind of thing that just takes people down all these really strange paths that do not lead to health, that get away from where they're okay. I'm trying to improve my microbiome, but okay, I'm not supposed to eat fruit. Okay, but then there's like these different paths. So some people go down this white potato path, whatever that thing is about. Other people go down the it's like all these different, then carnivore path. I mean, it ends up, it's like something that as you describe it, it sounds like, okay, it's not as super complicated. Like it seems like it makes sense, but because of a lot of the problematic nature of the theory itself and what it's built on, it ends up creating these really strange paths that people go down trying to find relief, and of course missing some of the core things that would really help them feel better. That's generally not offered to them, and we'll talk about that later.
One of the first questions that I would have, right, with a problem that I would find with this is, okay, so we spoke about it already. It's this thing that it embraces the germ theory, hook, line, and sinker. Okay, it's the good bugs versus the bad bugs. and it's this war, the 24/7 war, back and forth. So when we're dealing with that concept, it starts to be problematic, right? This constant war mentality is, I think, the first issue here. So for people listening, in your body, what is happening is not a war, okay? It's not a war because that's not how things were created in nature. It's not a constant war state inside one organism. If it were, life would look a lot differently. For example, if it's a war going on in your body and you get sick one day, all right? We've all experienced having the flu, okay? Now, if you had the flu and you got super, super sick, super high fever, you're on the brink of death, okay? Not really, but it just feels like that, right? You're just on the couch, you can't eat, you can't do anything, splitting headache. Okay, so the bad bugs have obviously taken complete control of your body. Like it's enough that you are actually completely rendered useless. Now, at that point, if it's a war, why on earth did the bugs just give up all of a sudden and you recover? Like if they've got you on the brink of death.
Right. Like there's a certain period of time that can be predicted and where it's like, yeah, there's one of several things are going to happen. It's like, okay, yeah, you could die. You could be sick for 24 hours. You could be going through the elimination for a week or 11 days. Like, I mean, there's not a whole lot of variation. And then if it is chronic, if it turns out to be a chronic, I mean, I use the word elimination. I don't really use the word sick. But if it turns out to be a chronic elimination, then you're gonna be going through those symptoms for a lot longer.
Yeah. It's
that's
crazy. Like we just have the wrong orientation. If an invading army just crashes the gates, they've stormed the community, they're about to slaughter the king, and imagine at that point they're like, you know what? Screw this.
Never mind, we're good.
Pack it up. Yeah, let's go home. Right. All that's left is to deliver the coup de grace, and you're done. But why wouldn't they do that?
Yeah. Why wouldn't it? They wouldn't win. Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
Because like your recovery makes no sense if you're already ready to receive the final blow. So recovery doesn't really make sense because they've won.
Now the science folks would come in and then they'll be like, well, it was just long enough for the body to become immune. It became immune, this wonderful immune system, which of course at least I know my opinion of that is very incredibly contrary to most people in the world. But so it's like they have answers for stuff like that. I was before this, I was thinking of that movie, was that Osmosis Jones? Did you?
Careful, I'm contagious.
You remember that? You ever seen it? Okay.
I haven't seen it.
It's literally like an animated kind of cartoon thing voiced by Chris Rock.
Okay.
And his character is like this little white blood cell, but it goes into the body of a dying Bill Murray who just ate all kinds of horrible stuff and he has like a heart attack, and it goes in and it sort of characterizes our modern day conception of what is going on inside the body. And so that this war thing that you're talking about, that's exactly, they show that. It's like this invading force of this virus is coming in and it's trying to kill the host, and they mobilize the troops and fight off. And it's that whole narrative. And again, it's this thing that we grow up with, this narrative, and it's in our vernacular, it's in how we talk. When people get over the flu, they'll talk about it like they just fought and won a war. Like, it was rough, but I got through it. And it's like, again, there's a fundamental misunderstanding of how the body operates and of sickness and disease.
That would be our first little injection here into what you should consider, because again, that's the core principle that they're operating on in this body of research, and it's always going to color the way they interpret their own data. So you have to be careful, right? You have to be careful because you have to know that this is where they're coming from. And where that principle is completely incorrect. Okay, so going forward, so if you're a listener here, you just always understand that when you plug into this research, is that's their paradigm. Okay, so you got to be careful.
And just to even get, because then somebody will say, well, why? Well, then why isn't it true? Then I'll say, well, then there's a series of questions that none of these folks, unless you get into Professor Arnold Ehret and folks like that, none of these folks ask when it comes to the germ theory or question, how much uneliminated unnatural food substance residue is in the GI tract? How much has that uneliminated unnatural, keyword unnatural substance, how has that started to ferment? Is that good bad bacteria, or is that just something that's not supposed to be there, period, and the body is trying to purge? Looking at what the body's doing, the fever and coughing and get that croup cough, getting this stuff out of there, stuff coming out of the skin, stuff coming out of the eyes and the ears and the crust and all that kind of stuff. What's the body trying to do? The body's trying to eliminate. Well, what does it want to eliminate? It's trying to eliminate something foreign matter. But then you're right. There's trying to get rid of that virus. It's like, did you just miss all of this stuff that's coming out of the body and all of this stuff? If you really want to use, instead of yellow soup, if you really want to get into some good ancient technology, try an enema. Like try a good old Egyptian enema.
Yeah.
And then see what comes out and see if it's natural or not. Like, is all that slime that comes out, all of that residue, all this stuff that smells like death, is that natural? Is that good for the body? And generally, when you actually see it come out, you cannot say that stuff was good, that it belonged there, and you certainly can't prove that this stuff didn't have anything to do with my negative symptoms and my not feeling well.
Yeah, exactly. In the 19th century, when there was a little overhaul in surgical proceedings where they realized that, hey, you know what, maybe we should wash our hands.
Right.
We should wash our hands when we're dealing with keeping a clean environment, and we were diving into someone's gut or abdomen or messing with their heart or messing with wounds. They were not cleaning themselves properly. So the interpretation going forward,
and it took a long time, didn't it? Before they figured it out.
It took long enough to figure that out. But the interpretation or the misinterpretation, because now we're in the throes in the late 19th century now, of the germ theory, of people accepting the germ theory. So they thought, oh, it must have been that the germs were getting into the surgical patients, and that's what would make surgical proceedings so dangerous. It wasn't that it was germs making them sick. It's because their hands are filthy, and filth has always been the bane of human existence. You can't put crap and rotting material, that same material that you just described, that you see in an enema, right? Rotting material. Yeah, if your hands are loaded with that and you start diving into the body and start fiddling with stuff, you're gonna put stuff into the blood and you will cause blood poisoning. Okay, but that doesn't have to do with it doesn't have to do with germs, because germs are a term, saprotrophs, okay? They're saprotrophic. It means they feed on decaying matter. That is the role of these microbes, these bacteria. If you get rid of all of the rotting material, then they don't need to come and do any work, right?
Yeah, they're right. It's no degeneration of the tissue, no damage of the internal cells, no poisoning of the blood. No, it's like the list goes on and on of all of the things that is prevented, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And let me read this quick little excerpt. This is Professor Arnold Ehret in the book Rational Fasting. He said, looking at it from a philosophical standpoint, this interpretation differs from and this interpretation, meaning the germ theory, differs from the medieval superstition in the period of fetishism only in the supplemental name. Formerly, it was an evil spirit, which imagination went so far as to believe in satanic personages. Now, the same dangerous monster is a microscopically visible being whose existence has been proven beyond any doubt. And of course, he goes on, but he was one of the few voices that just came out and said, the germ theory is blatantly wrong. It's like, you guys are wrong. Take a look at over here. Like, here's the foundation of human illness: constipation, cellular constipation from uneliminated waste and wrong eating habits. But we're still in this medieval era to this day of this evil spirit, this evil virus that just finds you and it's coming. And, it's like, okay, all right.
And we're giving this a good treatment here because it is really that important, right? You got to understand that all the data will be colored by this paradigm. I'll read you a quick passage. This is a Dr. M.L. Leverson, MD. I just posted this on my Instagram just the other day. And he says, the entire fabric of the germ theory of disease rests upon assumptions, which not only have not been proved, but which are incapable of proof. And many of them can be proved to be the reverse of truth. The basic one of these unproven assumptions, wholly due to Pasteur, is the hypothesis that all the so-called infectious and contagious disorders are caused by germs. And he was making this quote in the very early 20th century, so 1911. So this theory is just that. It is just a theory. And in this case, it's an untrue theory. So moving forward, we got that now. So we have to understand that that's where this is coming from, okay? Or at least a portion of this research is based in that understanding. So, okay. So we got that, right? The next little item that bothers me a little bit about this area of research is the fact that they are head over heels obsessed with fermented foods. Why don't they have a problem with fermented foods? It's because the focus is on the microbes themselves. And we're not dealing with other pertinent issues like, is this mucus forming food? Is this a suitable food for my physiology? None of that it's all out of the question. Fermented foods is their game. All right. So in my opinion, if you're asking me, it is not very suitable to eat something that is rotting or is giving off the byproducts of rot, because whenever we find that in nature, our natural instinct is to discard the item and look for food that hasn't rotted. It's a survival, in my opinion, it's this survival mechanism that is very useful to preserve food. But how you preserve food doesn't necessarily have to do with optimal health. That's just a food preservation technique. So yeah, they love fermented foods. They can't get enough of it. They can't stop talking about its benefits. What do you feel? I mean, what's your experience with fermented foods? Does Eric have to say anything about it? That's no pressure. Just what do you?
Oh yeah, no, because this is one of the topics, one of the great things that people, because you have people that it's like one of those shared things amongst from the many raw foodists over into the mainstream. They kind of all agree on this fermented foods business, and that microbiome and that's where I start having a real problem with some of the raw food theoretical frameworks and vegans and things, because they want to try to adopt the exact same nutritional theories and paradigms that were created for and by meat, dairy, omnivoric human eaters that really should just be discarded and we start over again.
Yeah.
But this is one of those instances where, again, the vegans and the raw foodists will accept this concept of microbiome, and they'll say, well, we won't use rotten meat or we won't use rotten dairy-based yogurt or whatever. We'll do plant-based yogurt. We'll do sauerkraut. Now, really the only item Arnold Ehret talks about, like, the use of sauerkraut in certain circumstances as a transitional item early on, but not vinegar based, but just sort of like a naturally, if you want to use the word natural, but just a non-vinegar based sauerkraut. But it's not something that you're eating all the time, or something that I ate it years ago for a period of time. And it's not really even explicitly, it's definitely not because of this biome concept. It's just like there's certain circumstances where that can help you move and eliminate if you're really constipated, or if you're going through a particular period of elimination. It's just a tool, but it's not a tool that you have to use. Similar to plant-based yogurt, I'm not really against these, like, people hear me talk, they think that I'm starkly, no, never eat. It's like, no, there can be circumstances where some of these things can help you get over a particular period in your transition, but that's the optimal concept, is it's a transition. This isn't how you're supposed to eat the rest of your life. And so, but yeah, in general, I'm not a fan. I agree with Ehret, and he's very much against vinegar. And there's things that surprise people to the point where in one's transition, he almost, sometimes it reads as if he would almost rather somebody use certain dairy products, like what's it called, cottage cheese or something like that, than to use vinegar. Like, very, very against vinegar. And that's something that I agree with, and try to stay, over the years have tried to stay away from it as much as possible. Yeah. And as you get cleaner and cleaner, that real pungent kind of that fermented things, and that pungent I give you, this is kind of a funny story. The one of the first raw food friends that I had many years ago, I'd never heard of kombucha tea. And this we're talking like 2005 and 6. And so it's creeping up as this thing. And I didn't know what it was. And somebody said, like, it's like this mushroom tea, and I'm like, okay, I had no clue. And we were in a store, they opened it up and drank some and like handed it to me, and I smelled it. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Get this out of my face. This is disgusting. I can't believe that you would drink this, and people are saying that this would be healthy. This is horrible. Yeah. And so I mean, but then that leads us to the marketing efforts. Anytime there's something that can, just because when something relieves symptoms, it doesn't mean that it's healing anything. So yeah, you could drink warm milk or sour milk, and maybe it would relieve a symptom or cause an elimination. That doesn't mean you're anywhere near healed, but that's a problem. People compare and associate the overcoming symptoms, the treating of symptoms, with actual healing. Yeah. And that's really problematic. But yeah, as far as just the fermented, from a practical and objective standpoint, it doesn't make any sense to eat rotten things. Yeah. Like, that doesn't make, because, okay, again, historically, why did wine and apple beer, or like hard apple cider, all these different drinks, like, why did they get so popular? So you could look at it from the standpoint, well, there were periods in history where folks were getting so filthy and they didn't know how to keep their water clean, their water sources. Because then people say, well, the water, it's got bacteria and you drink it and people are dying. Yeah, but how did that bacteria get in there? Because I bet it wasn't there before the improper biochemistry started to happen, because that's what happens. Things start out clean, and then you get nasty humans that are eating nasty things and putting out weird chemical concoctions that were never supposed to exist on the planet. And then we start to have some issues. Yeah. The obsession with wine and just alcohol in general, it's a fascinating study to just go to any supermarket or grocery store, and they have aisles. In each one will have huge aisles and shrines to alcohol, because you got this combination of it, get you drunk and messes with all of that, because people don't want to, you don't feel good. It's an antidote, because alcohol treats the symptom of of being filthy, of going through your emotional issues, and so you get some alcohol, and they got this entire just aisles and aisles of beer and wine, and just historically, you go back and people say, well, my ancestors, they didn't have access to water. So, and even in the United States, hard apple cider became a thing because people were dying all the time. It was so filthy, and they go drink some kind of water that had been infected with something, and then they die. So they're like, okay, we'll just, there's a lot of apples, so we'll just make a lot of apple cider, hard apple cider, put it in these barrels, and people of all ages are drinking alcohol, and that becomes the foundation of the way alcohol works in the United States in particular. But that's similar kind of stories all over the place, where at the end of the day, what we're talking about is sickness, fundamental sickness, because you would not crave, you would not be able to handle or desire alcohol, vinegar, kombucha tea, rotten milk, fermented, whatever. I mean, you just wouldn't want that.
Right.
And as you start to clean your senses up, those smells, stuff no longer smells good. Cheese. We're talking about fermentation, and you got a block of pus that has been turned into this nasty fermenting thing that smells like gym socks, but people don't make that association. Yeah. They're really gonna go eat food that smells like sweat and athlete's foot.
Yeah, it's incredible. And this is good, because this actually feeds right into the next little thing that I wanted to bring up. But you're right, and the reason that we're willing to do these things, and particularly in this field of study, I mentioned it before, but the reason that we would go to these lengths is because we know that we think that it provides us with these good gut microbes. But the interesting thing is, and I found, because I tried to scour around and source as many different types of interviews and lectures and professionals and see what they had to say. And I found this really interesting. One of them brought up a study where they wanted to do a metagenomic sequencing on kimchi products. Okay. And they took a product, and of the 900 or so strains that were found in the test, only 4 of them were said to be prebiotic, right? Very, very few. What that means is, and we haven't defined that term, prebiotic. Sorry about that, but prebiotic basically means the food that the bacteria eat Probiotic would mean the bacteria themselves. So if you eat a prebiotic, it means you're eating something like fiber. If you eat a probiotic, you are eating the bacteria itself. Okay, so if you didn't know, that's what we're talking about. So they studied this kimchi and they found that a paltry few of the 900 strains of bacteria that they found in the kimchi product were actually prebiotic. Almost zero. So what that means is if people are drinking this kimchi or taking this kimchi in, thinking that it's going to help to populate their gut with all these wonderful healthy bacteria, well, they'd be dead wrong in this case with this product that they tested, because it doesn't do that at all. The benefits of this fermented product would be other than whatever microbes it cultivates. So how many products might be found to have the same results? Okay, here's the point is that we have equated fermented foods with an influx of a whole host of bacteria that you don't usually get from food. That might not necessarily be the case at all. Okay, this is marketing. Right?
Yeah.
It's exactly what you said. It's this marketing that touts fermented foods, good bacteria, and we just take them in without thinking. Right? So I found that very interesting, and this was coming from an expert in the field. Okay, now. So I mean, we can go on about fermented food. There's other things to discuss there, but
I had come across an article, this Dan one that 100-year-old yogurt product that they started marketing 100 years ago, and that's the thing. You start to see like, oh, let's market this. It's yogurt for gut health, and then you just, I mean, whatever can be marketed like that, they start marketing it like that. It's like, apple cider vinegar. That's healthy. Drink that. I don't know. Smells like it'll help. I mean, what? They just start making things up.
The thing that this leads directly into, that I also find interesting, is this mistaken idea, because like we said, we're doing this to cultivate the bacteria because the focus is the gut bacteria. That's the focus, right? So with that in mind, what we're doing here is we're taking on that faulty misunderstanding that if it's in our body, we need to eat it in order to maintain that fluid or that material or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
Now we apply that thinking. If, ladies and gentlemen, think about this. How many examples of things can you find that would completely destroy that notion, right? Now, that doesn't necessarily immediately disprove. Sorry, I should clarify. I'm not saying that immediately disproves the concept of microbial health. What I'm saying is that because we tend to be myopically focused on what cultivates good gut bacteria, we start to ignore other things that are pertinent and relevant, like the idea that it is not necessarily true at all that you need to eat that which is found in the body. So we can talk about hair, we can talk about milk, we can talk about semen, we can talk about cerebrospinal fluid, we can talk about hydrochloric acid. I could be rich and famous if I released the books, the hydrochloric acid diet. Your gut produces it 24/7. You need all that stomach acid in order to digest food. Obviously, you need to take it into your diet because that will make more hydrochloric acid. Okay? None of these things that I've listed, they are equally found in your body. They're equally natural, but you do not have to eat them in the diet in order to maintain those things. Hair, nails, eyeballs.
Blood. That's the big one.
blood.
Mr. Liver King. You don't have to drink blood. You're gonna be okay. Like, we're all fine. I've never drank blood, and I'm good.
Yeah, blood, lymph, milk. You said it, milk. What? Nobody needs to drink milk in order to produce milk. Your body takes care of that. And when it comes to the microbiome, what I would suggest is that this is also something that is taken care of by your body, provided you are eating the right food that nourishes your body. The rest takes care of itself. And so I'll bring up one of the major issues that I've got with this field of research is that, and again, none of this is meant to be in like a disproving of the science way. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to add context so that you have a better, broader frame of reference, a perspective in which to determine how you take this information in.
Yeah, it's something to think about, because this is one. It's a YouTube video. If we wanted to write a paper, like a paper that could be looked at and scrutinized on an academic level, we could if we wanted to. But I'm not inspired to do that, because the people that are going to get it are going to get it. We don't need to prove this to the the college professor somewhere. It's just. But yeah, so that's a good point. It's like what this is trying to infuse a little bit of critical thinking, your own critical thinking. Like, think through these things yourself. Like, you don't have to listen. You don't have to believe us, or just think about it yourself, like logically. Look into it, and you can read a few articles on it. Most people, because what gets me is when people talk so strongly about the science, and all you've done is listen to Oprah. You talk about or one of these, like the Today Show, quoting or misquoting a scientific study. You didn't read that study.
Yeah.
How about read the study? But even reading one study isn't going to help, because you got to read the series of studies that it's a part of in the conversation that's happening. Most people don't do that. And so yet they're still trying to come up with this, well, it's the science. It's like, well, what Fauci, who told us?
Yeah.
We're supposed to just believe this stuff?
Right. We're making all sorts of assumptions, just like you said, making assumptions, and we're not necessarily thinking about them for ourselves. And that's a problem. And in this area of research, I think one of the biggest problems, and I'll just say this, I think one of the biggest problems is that because of our orientation and myopic focus on the solely the importance of cultivating the bacteria, what happens is that we put the cart before the horse. Okay? When I say the cart before the horse, and maybe there's people out there that don't know what I mean by that. It means if you have a horse and carriage and you put the carriage in front of the horse and expect the carriage to pull the horse, it will not work, because you're misidentifying cause and effect. All right. It's the horse that pulls the carriage, and you can't reverse that order, because then it doesn't work. So we're putting the cart before the horse. When we focus on the bacteria and say we need to do everything that cultivates bacteria, what we should be doing, however, is not doing that, because that would be putting the cart before the horse. Our bacteria, our inner microbes, our entire microbial life is designed to work in harmony with what the host does in their lifestyle and respond harmoniously in perfect balance with the conditions that the host provides. That is the purpose. And anything that tries to skip around the intelligent response of the microbiome to what the host is doing is probably going to be doing things that are in violation of the intelligence with which the natural community wants to respond to those conditions. Okay, did I say that right? What I'm saying is that the microbiome is designed to work in harmony with you, and it responds intelligently in proper harmonious proportions that might defy our ability to conceptualize. And it makes these responses to what we're doing in the lifestyle. And so if we try to skip around that and assess a symptom that we have, let's just say whatever symptom, okay, I've got a rash or whatever, and we make this intellectual assumption, well, it must be because my gut microbes are out of balance. What you do is instead of correcting the lifestyle, what you do is you jump straight to the bacteria. And then you say, oh, I'm just going to eat these fermented foods, influx a whole bunch of bacteria. See, now what you've done is because you've put the cart before the horse, now you've introduced into your body all these bacteria that your body didn't intelligently cultivate because the conditions weren't present. And so you have it's troublesome. We can't go around nature. Usually we end up messing something up. So that's a little bit of a gripe that I have, is that we're so focused and we forget that cause is us, is how we eat and live. And it's supposed to be a natural response to that. But we jump right to the bacteria.
Right. Yeah. It's the symptom-based, treatment-based thinking that comes out of our modern medical industry, and then all of the meat and dairy industries and the sales and marketing that goes into that. It's all put together. But what happens also, unfortunately, is people get in this vicious cycle of hopping from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. So they'll have all these problems with their stomach, and they, as you say, okay, they read somewhere that get a lot of fermented foods, and so they go out and they get some kimchi and they're like, okay, I'm going to try this, and they're treating the symptom a little bit, and some of the issue kind of subsides a little bit, but then then some other issue is coming up. Or if they tried that thing and it doesn't work, now they're still on this search. So they're trying, okay, what's the next apple cider vinegar? Let me try to drink that. And then, before you know it, they're back to Pepto-Bismol and milk of magnesia. And they're still on this search. But it's the same thing when you go to medical doctors. This is not medical advice, disclaimer, blah, blah. But you go to medical doctor and they're like, oh, I got some cold and flu-like symptoms, or I blow my nose and got inflammation. They're like, oh, well, here's some allergy medication. And I'm talking from experience, because this is what happened to me when I was young. And so you take that, and then maybe some of the symptoms are improved, but then now I got a bloody nose every day because that's a side effect of this drug. Yeah. And so you go back to the doctor. Okay, I got this side effect. Can you help with that? It's like, well, take this. Like this other drug will help with that side effect. Then you go, that drug is okay, well, the side effect is improved, but now there's another side effect. And before you know it, you end up having 10 to 20 medications, and it's just this vicious cycle. But the same thing happens on any of these, like whether it's, you call it supplements, supplementation mindset, medicine mindset. It's always about this, what we call the additive principle, trying to add something externally that goes against, like what you were saying. Just because something's in the body doesn't mean we need to consume it. Doesn't mean that we need to have yellow soup just because it's in the body, but that's the logic. That's that logic that they get into.
Yeah. It's we need to be a bit more responsible, right? Just be a bit more responsible with how readily we take this stuff in. There are a couple studies that, very interestingly, were in a book. I'm not gonna name the book that I was reading from, because I'm not interested in suggesting that I'm attacking people. All right, so I'm not going to tell you which book I was reading from, but I found it very interesting, and I'll get into this. There were a bunch of studies that were listed in the book that were put there to extol the benefits of what my next little issue is the fecal transplant.
Yeah, okay. I knew we were going
to the fecal transplant. So it was meant to extol the virtues of that, but interestingly, I read it and I was like, wait a minute, this is giving me the opposite, right, interpretation. I'm like, this tells me that this stuff might not work in many cases. But I'll get into that. The next obvious thing that this leads into, now that we're in the ballpark of, okay, if it's in the body, you don't necessarily need to eat it or inhale it or smoke it or whatever, okay, it is, we're jumping. See, this is where the marketing and the medical industry comes in. This is the problem, guys, right? We identify this potential for therapeutic use. And what do? We start to find ways that we can introduce a healing treatment or remedy or pill or whatever that divorces us from the responsibility of just doing what nature has always done in order to correct health, which is looking after your own body, looking after what you eat, cleaning out your system, getting rid of what the nonsense that's in there, and only eating what's right food. That takes responsibility. And so now the medical industry jumps onto the bandwagon, and now we're starting to create new treatments that allow you to just disband with responsibility. Oh, I'll just get a fecal transplant, right?
Yeah.
And and yeah, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, what on this fecal transplant thing? Again, lots of science to support that it can be helpful and beneficial. So I can't knock the science. I can't knock the fact that a person has experienced relief, right? If that's what happened, that's what happened. Okay, so can't do anything about that. But we got to understand that there's context. Okay, there's context here. So,
yeah, well, that's kind of what I was getting into before. The difference between treatment-based thinking and the entire medical establishment, a lot of homeopathy, and unfortunately, a lot of areas in modern-day naturopathy and naturopaths that have kind of veered away from some of the original, natural hygienic traditions and things. It's very much treatment-based thinking. Somebody said, I don't feel good, this is the problem. And then they give you some herbs, or they give you a probiotic, a prebiotic, a fecal transplant. Like, it's all treatment-based thinking, as opposed to what can I do to actually cure this at the root, the foundation. Because if this is a problem, you're not going to cure me by giving me the healthy stool of a host, of another person, because there's a lot of questions with that. Well, what was that guy eating? Why is his stool so healthy? What makes a healthy stool? We're going to probably disagree on whose stool is healthy. But that the foundation of that is treatment-based thinking.
Yes.
And that's what I would love to see folks' paradigm shift into, one that deals with the foundation of human illness, that deals with a concept: if you clean the system out, then it's going to function and operate as it was designed to do. As Arnold Ehret says, the body is an air gas engine that thrives on air. You can't go however many minutes without air, but you can go days without food, or you can go all those kind of things. We know that, but just, we don't have to read a scientific study for you to know that you're breathing right now. You're probably, and you might not be eating anything, but you're breathing. And if you stop doing that, you would, things wouldn't be good. You'd pass. You'd pass out and start breathing again. Unless something inhibited that, then you would potentially pass away. If eventually you would need to get some oxygen into your system. That's primary, but that's where the science is backward. The scientific paradigm is backward, because they're not starting there as the foundation of human life. For years, they started with protein, as it's literally built into the word. Pro meaning first, teen meaning principle, where they theorized the first principle to life was eating this nitrogenous substance that they wanted to name protein. So from the foundation, we have problems. And Yeah, I'd read about the fecal transplantation years ago, and somewhere way on my channel, I have a video about it because I was just like, oh man. And I'll tell you, because at the time, I was getting in these arguments and even bringing this up. There's going to be probably arguments down in the comments section about not being a friend of urine drinking.
Yeah.
And so I started comparing the two, and it would make them mad because I'm just like, look, I don't advocate and I'm not a fan of urine drinking, of feces eating, none of that. Like, and I put it together and they didn't like that. They're like, oh, it's not the same thing. And I'm like, okay, the medical field embraced fecal eating, and some of the naturopathic folks and homeopathic folks have gotten into the urine drinking. And I'm saying, we don't need any of that, not for health, not to heal. We don't need any of that.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. And it seems a little unintuitive to be using your own waste products to do any kind of therapeutic thing. Because if we do find that it's symptomatic relief, that's one thing, but that might not necessarily be exactly what we want to rely on in the future whenever we have symptomatic episodes. And it's even, it's like, okay, if you want to, I'd rather see somebody eat some yogurt, because like it's going to do the same thing. If it's just about dealing with symptoms, there's better ways to even treat the symptoms. Yes.
But like you were talking about, once money gets involved in marketing, and now the medical folks is like, well, we can easily take we take stool samples all the time. We can just, we can turn that into a thriving business.
Yeah.
And, but again, it all comes back to just that fundamental problematic treatment-based mindset and not searching out, almost like giving up. Like, we're not searching out for those fundamental answers and to explore, like, what does the body do when it's actually totally clean?
Such a good question, right? When the body's working well and clean, what does it do? What does it look like? Right? How do you get that to work in your body? Health is not sustained because of a proportional amount of fecal matter that you put into you. That has never been where we get health. Okay, so this is cool. I'm going to read a couple, well, not read word for word, but just make reference to some of the studies that were listed here in this book. And well, we'll talk about it. So they did one study where they took adult men with insulin resistance. Okay. So they took adult men with insulin resistance, and what they wanted to do was they wanted to take the microbiome, the fecal matter from a lean person, from someone without insulin resistance, introduce it into the insulin resistant men and see what happened. Okay. And what it says here is that they did receive an effect, a benefit, which is incredible, right? They had a lowering of their blood sugar and improved insulin sensitivity, which is an incredible bit of data, right? All we did was this fecal transplant, and now we have better insulin sensitivity. It goes on, though. Unfortunately, the effect only lasted a few weeks because they didn't change, right? Because they didn't change their diet. So the new microbiome couldn't be sustained. And so I stopped reading, and I was like, well, hold on a second. Did that just prove that it's what we do that creates and sustains the type of microbiome that you have in your personal system, right? As much as it is interesting that they had this change, but because the change was affected from the view that it's the bacteria, well, this is just an experiment. I'm sure they didn't have assumptions. They were just seeing what happened. But I'm saying is that right now, that's the thinking. And so this seems to just prove immediately what we're saying here, in that it's the lifestyle that makes the difference, obviously, because they did the transplant and then they just went right back to what their original cultivation was because they didn't change the lifestyle.
Right. So and a huge question, which maybe is in there, but it's like, well, what was their original diet?
Yes.
What do they eat? And what
Yes.
and how controlled was that? Because a lot of these studies, they don't control the diet like that. They
Yes.
don't. They'll talk about it and look at it, but they don't really restrict or say, oh, just eat this so that you can get a real clean study across the board, which still wouldn't be a clean study because each person's body is different in terms of the kinds of waste left behind and the degeneration and the genetic and all those kind of things. And so, those studies can be tough, but continue reading those results.
It's just really interesting. And now, of course, the author of this particular book, all about a plant-based diet. Okay. And so, on the same page, like everyone's on the same page. It's just adding context. And there's no further discussion about that study. It just goes on. And the next study, I'm like, wait, hold on a second. Let's talk about why they went right back, right? Because, it was the diet. Okay. So there was another study where, let's see, yes. So they could use the gut microbiome profile of a group of individuals to determine ahead of time what their blood sugar response would be like in relation to food. Okay. So they have a bunch of people, they take a reading of their microbiome profile, they have it on the screen or whatever, however they view it, and then they can make predictions and they say, okay, this person's going to have a good response, he won't have a bad response, blah blah blah. And so what is written here is, in other words, and they were correct, right? They had accurate predictions. They could make accurate predictions on what the blood sugar response would be to food, depending on the type of microbiome that was in their gut, or that was read from their samples. Okay, that's amazing data. Very, very informative, right? What was interesting to me is just the wording here at the end, and it says, in other words, you have a unique, completely personal response to the food you eat that is a reflection of the makeup of your gut microbiota. And what I thought was like, I think it's the other way around. I think it's your gut microbiota that are a reflection of your lifestyle in which you eat, not the other way around. It's not that they have a certain gut microbiota and that determines their blood sugar response. No, that's the wrong interpretation. It's the other way around, right? Their blood sugar response, their gut microbe profile is completely determined by the lifestyle, right? So it's just the way it was worded. It seems to be the fascination with the gut microbe, trying to impress you with, it's the microbes are the key, and they're good, but they're just responding to conditions that you set in the lifestyle. Did you have anything you wanted to add before I just give some final thoughts?
I guess the one what that brought up for me was then people want to get into the gut brain connection discussion, and which gets weird quick the way that, because it's like, there's things that, of course, so they'll bring up an example like, if you think about food, or if you're hungry, then you can cause yourself to secrete digestive fluids in your stomach. But then it's like, okay, but what food are you craving? Because you can make changes that actually affect what you crave. So it's true. You can think about some stuff and and maybe that causes that reaction, and there's just one example. There's all kinds of stuff you could get into there, because from a naturopathic standpoint and a more esoteric, just observational standpoint, you start looking at the intestines and making a comparison. Well, that intestine looks like a brain. I'm not saying that it is. I'm not saying that it's not. Those are more esoteric kind of philosophical discussions, where there are people that look at the intestines and say the stomach is a second brain. And you can look at the brain, looks similar to this, looks like a big brain. Well, do with that what you will. Of course, there is a connection, but the power that we have to change that, the nature of that connection by what we choose to eat, is very interesting and is not adequately analyzed in these type of studies and in this type of conceptual framework when people talk about the gut-brain connection.
I'm so glad that we're here just like hashing this out, because as with many of the videos that you on your channel make and I make, you're not finding that anywhere. Anywhere, right? Like
Right.
nobody's talking about this. Like nobody is giving this subject this type of treatment.
Right.
No, nobody. I haven't seen it. I can't say for sure. I have not seen this treatment of this subject at all from anybody. Right.
Mm-mm. The closest would maybe, you know, and not this treatment, getting into studies and stuff, but like the Dr. Morris quote on that is basically, his approach is like, look, you can't kill what's supposed to be there, because people get real obsessed about, oh, you got to add all the probiotic in there, it's gonna die, and you're back the good bacteria. He's just like, look, even when you take something that I don't recommend in general, but they love passing out antibiotics like candy, in hospitals and doctors' offices and things, which is not. We can all agree that that's the folks that are into the biome. We can agree that that's not a good thing to kill off whatever supposed to be in there, but using that type of those means.
Yes.
But you can't. It's always going to start to repopulate and be what it's supposed to be. But that becomes a question. What is it supposed to be? What does it become again when you're eating a diet that is more in line with the human physiology, as opposed to studies based on we took 10 people and eight out of 9 of them eat at McDonald's on a regular basis. You're not having a good study when you're basing your study off of McDonald's and Burger King eaters, Taco Bell eaters. You're not. That's not going to be a good study of what's going on in the
yes.
And that would be a question. It's like, okay, if I'm getting a fecal transplant, I better get a list of the last month of what that person was eating.
Yeah.
I don't need no Taco Bell fecal transplant, but that's the ridiculousness of all of this stuff. But
one of the studies that I had in the back of my mind, I didn't get into it, but whatever, I'll just bring it up quick. They had 3-month-olds, okay, 300 toddlers that were 3 months old, and they wanted to test fecal transplantation. And so they grabbed feces from these 3-month-olds, and they transferred them over to germ-free mice. And I read that, I'm like, what on earth is a germ-free mouse? And when would you ever find a germ-free animal in any natural setting?
Germ-free mice have a functional immune system, but were born and raised in the isolator bubble. Bubble.
Natural setting.
Bubble.
I've heard, like, how would you ever? And so they came to conclusions about, oh, well, the transplant worked. It's like, well, okay, but what's a germ-free? When would you ever have a germ-free animal? That's impossible. It's completely impossible. It's excuse the data. So anyway, yeah, it's just funny.
Isolator bubble.
Natural setting.
Bubble.
About animals that are free of all foreign life forms, apart from themselves, versus a conventional animal which harbors normal indigenous but undefined microflora.
Okay, I didn't have time to bring this study up when we were in the interview, but I had to go through it with you guys. So there's another section here in the book that talks about a woman who was treated with a fecal transplant for a type of bacteria that is associated with gut inflammation, okay? Clostridium difficile infection. And here's the interesting thing. What happened was 16 months, okay, after the fecal transplant, this woman suffered from explosive weight gain, Okay, so 16 months after the fecal transplant, she had unintentional weight gain and going from 136 pounds to 170 pounds. So explosive weight gain. They make a point of saying no change in her lifestyle, no change in her diet, no change in her stress levels, nothing, right? No change, just the fecal transplant. Now, what's interesting about this is that this is exciting data because the feeling here that you're getting is that this shows the power of the gut microbiome to influence our bodies, right? So what is being marveled at here is that, holy smokes, we can feed the same food to a person, and that same food can have a completely different effect on that same person if you artificially change up their gut microbiome. And it has a drastically different effect, same food. We're like marveling at that. And then we just move on to the next subject, and it just goes on and listing different studies. Okay, but see, I read that and I'm thinking, whoa, wait a minute. Hold on. This study was put here to show how powerful microbiome influencing can be. But what we are also reading by default is that the fecal transplant had disastrous health consequences for the person that underwent the transplant. We just saw a quote unquote successful transplant that treated a C. diff infection, and more than a year later, this poor woman went through explosive weight gain. Okay? Now, how and why is that a problem? What that tells us is that when we try to find a way around doing what we're supposed to be doing and try to effect healing with our left-brained reductionist method, what ends up happening is usually we lose, right? We get it wrong. And so if for most people who get these types of procedures, nothing goes wrong ever, great. But there is a danger that can affect you long-term, right? So we gotta have our thinking caps on here, guys. But of course, to add to the complexity of the issue, she was treated with, it looks like a whole host of other pharmaceuticals prior to the fecal transplant. So how that all affected the situation, I mean, it's just, meddling with the medical industry to improve your health it's just a recipe for disaster. So was the explosive weight gain a result of the fecal transplant alone? Would she not have experienced that had it not been for all the pharmaceuticals? Right? So there's still questions here. There's still questions, but I think what we're getting at here is just that, generally speaking, you are safer letting Mother Nature take care of your health and not a health industry that doesn't have it all put together quite yet.
It's really funny, and we really need to really have our thinking caps on and our consideration when we assess what is otherwise good data, because the data is great. It adds, like what we're doing here, it just adds context to the health field, which is very important, and we all make use of that. And these individuals and groups have done us a service. But again, we just got to have considerations. Okay, we got to add the right context. We got to have our thinking caps on. Got to have common sense when we start making decisions about our lives. And so. Yeah. And
start getting the proper resources so we can start conducting our own experiments, coming from our perspective. Because I mean, you bring up a whole rabbit hole point of germ-free mice. I mean, what's that coming out of? That's coming out of the sadistic experimentation that, because the average person has no clue that it happens and doesn't know anything about it, there's all these plethora of animals that are tortured on a regular basis that have been tortured for decades, and it's just part of common practice. In sense, the lab, it's a lab animal.
Isolator bubble, isolator bubble.
And I think I did a video where it was just looking at, and I was doing it on lab cats and dogs because that would get people mad, and just the stuff that they do to these animals. Then again, because they keep it quiet, they got their money sources coming in from the different people that have interests in funding said. Because that's a whole other thing to analyze. Who paid for the research that you're reading? That larger context. But yeah, I mean, you're getting into. I mean, that's a huge problem that when you get into those type of experimentation where it's all, you got all these animals, this sterile environment, and trying to test these theories in that type of space. The one thing again that I give credit for to the medical establishment is they're very good at trauma and bringing somebody that's on the verge of death to baseline. But once they get you to baseline, I mean, they got ECMO machines and they got things that can bring you from the brink of death and do some phenomenal stuff. But once you get to baseline, that's the end of the usefulness of their care, in my opinion, oftentimes, because here comes the meatloaf meal. As soon as you can eat and you can eat solid food, they're bringing in the meatloaf and the chicken sandwich and the bread and the dairy and the high fructose corn syrup infused juices. And it's just, and you would think that with all of this sophisticated, so-called scientific things that and machinery and that stuff, you think that they would be able to figure out something as basic as in a hospital, you're not supposed to eat those things. Like if you're trying to heal, like we don't care what you do when you leave, but in here, while you're healing, you're going to get fruits and vegetables. You're going to get some fresh juice and an enema. Like, but that's not where it's at. We're very far away from that, unfortunately.
So what are we saying here in summary? Okay, so we went over the fact that this research is based entirely in the germ theory, and that will always skew the interpretation of their data because the focus is on the microbiome. It allows us to not make any other considerations and focus only on what cultivates the bacteria. So means we eat anything and everything as long as it's prebiotic in nature, right? No other considerations. That's a problem, right? In the book that I was reading from, the author discounts the health benefits of juice, fresh pressed juice, okay? Kind of dismisses it a bit as, well, we don't want processed food. I almost shot a grape out of my nose when I read that. I'm like, no processed food. They talk about adding wheat to the diet and pastas and oils and fermented foods and kombuchas and a whole whack of processed foods. And I'm like, we're gonna knock orange juice as a processed food, but in the same book, we're gonna talk about adding all of the coffee.
Wheat products. Wow.
Coffee. Perfectly fine. Olive oil. It's like, wow. Okay, come on. Anyway, so yes, there's a problem there where it's focused on the microbiome, and then there's a whole other host of little issues and problems that we got to take into consideration as well. I think we just discount what digests well in the human body, right? What type of food preparation actually works, actually does not produce mucus and pus, okay, and metabolic waste products, right? Because there's no consideration for that in this approach. It's all about what cultivates bacteria. Okay, whether it's loading yourself with probiotics, which are the actual bacteria themselves, that's another problem. One of the experts in the field that I was listening to talked about how that's a problem. It was nice to hear him talk about it, and he mentioned that you can have probiotic drinks or whatever, and they don't even colonize. They might last in your gut for a week, but then they just go away because you don't eat what is supposed to be triggering that particular strain of bacteria. You just had some kombucha one day, and then so it went in and out, right? So we set up a whole slew of ways to misinterpret or to skew the way we should be structuring our diet and health. And I think I think we've done that here. We've just given areas for you to consider out there. Okay, we're not coming hard on any of the data. We're just adding things to consider, and you can take that and make your considerations. And if that's the case and it helps you, then we've done our job, right?
Yeah, and you when you were talking about that, I was thinking of the many raw foodists that get addicted to probiotics. And I'm using the word addicted, not scientifically. I'm just using it here as we're just hanging out. You know, they let's say they take it every day and they don't want to stop. And why is that? Because there's certain things, and this is where like we had the discussion, the raw versus cooked mucus-free, and sort of the usefulness or not usefulness of certain cooked foods and that kind of thing. But from our perspective, we're looking at that. It's like, well, wait a minute. If there's certain things that you feel like you require, you're having trouble digesting something, and just because you didn't cook it, maybe you're not supposed to eat that. If you need to take something to help it digest,
right?
That's like an issue. And so that just came to mind when you were saying that, because that's actually a question that I'll get a lot, is people say, is probiotics okay? Can I take probiotics? And it's like, I don't recommend it. There are certain cases where I'd rather see somebody get into that versus some of these other things we talked about today, just to deal with some symptoms and just to get to the next day. But overall, as something that you would take on a regular basis, no, I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah, exactly. And you said it. It's a process, right? It's all in context. If that's what we need for a particular situation to just give us a little bit of an assist to get us back on track, then that's what we can do. That we can make that choice, but you have to get back on track, and you got to do what's right for your body so that it can start to take care of itself, rather than you having to rely on these things that obviously are not necessarily the best choices to make all the time. Yeah, man, I really appreciate this. Oh my God, I think we did a good service here, and I'm really glad that I was able to get your feedback, get your opinion on this. The two heads are better than one. So much love, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Really enjoyed it. Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, this was fun. So, guys, you can, I'll post all the links below for ways that you can check out Professor Spira's work. You can check out his channel, check out the website. We'll post all of these, all the links below. And that'll be it for now. So thank you. I hope you got something out of this. You can subscribe to the FreeMelon Society, this channel, and give us a like, give us a thumbs up. If you have comments, leave them down below. And finally, we're all treading the same waters. We're all in the same boat here. All of the sources that I looked at to just get this general idea, this is all from people that are giving good, healthy messages out there in the health community, okay? And we all have very similar orientation when it comes to how we should structure the diet, okay? In terms of eating plant-based foods, abstaining from the really, really bad stuff. We're all on the same page here. So we're just trying to help as many people out as possible. So thank you very much, guys. Professor Spira, it's been awesome. We'll do it again next time.
Most definitely.
All right, brother. Yeah, thanks, guys. See you on the next one.